Hey, this is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love is going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a really important viewer question, and that is, how do you develop healthy communication again after you have experienced a psychopathic injury or a difficult, traumatizing relationship where things have been sort of off balance and communication has been affected? This will really sort of hurt your vision, your excitement, your passion moving forward if you don't have this ironed up, if you don't have this, ironed out and buttoned up, if you don't have really your vision sort of crystallize, it'll sort of feel fragmented and broken, and you'll feeling like a lack of energy or a depletion if you haven't really sort of unwound from the psychopathic injury that can really land you oftentimes where you're on a soggy hill with your butt in a pile of mud saying, how did I end up here? How is this my outlook? Like everything appeared so different. So one important thing I think to navigate when you're developing and trying to move through into a healthy communication style and also healthy representation style. So actually, basically, after this sort of very valley moment, these guttural moments, these really down, dark nights of the soul, or really where you're feeling you're in really unstable or shaky ground, and you don't really have that sort of vista point moving forward to launch yourself onto, like you're rock climbing and you just don't know right where to throw the next hook. So it becomes very difficult to navigate and feel successful and strong and putting your best foot forward, especially then when it also comes to communication after you've been through a relationship that has been hurtful, hard, or harmful, such as you might have experienced in adversity or toxicity, as they say, in a relationship with someone who is a malignant narcissist or a psychopath. So I know we're sort of got a big lump here, underneath it all, and sort of how we lab things together. But in terms of, I think our viewer question is, developing communication is going to be different, feel different, sound different, look different, taste different for you after you've been through a traumatizing relationship. In other words, you really need to get your hands back on the steering wheel. Things get without a lot of traction. Things get muddy. Things get even ugly. Things get broken in the process, meaning, the communication between both of you, the two sides. So it's almost like we should be a well-oiled machine. But what happens? What happens when everything screeches to a halt? Almost like this pandemic, but really we're talking about really emotionally. Communication, where one person is fed up. They've had it up to here, and then the other person, you really can't peel them off the ceiling. I mean, you're in Cathedral, Michelangelo, and they're still, nothing can really sort of get them grounded. They're just always going to elevate, really, the higher the ceiling, the higher the, escalation. Things can get very rough. Communication can become way too rough. I think that if we look at like a red flag, when we're learning about communication and sort of putting your best foot forward and sort of being cohesive, strong in your core. So we're talking about being empowered and being able to get along with others. In other words, unlike the narcissist, which has to trample, plot over, rape and pillage over others, and then hang their victory flag at, look, who I outsmarted, outdid. And they're basically, they've got the winning flag on who knows a pile of what, but it's somewhere. So even if you wave, a pine tree with a flag of surrender, that's better than waving no flag. You need to communicate. You need to be able to surrender. You really need to sort of purge it out, get it out, and really say, this is not working. So being able to look at reality square in the face is a task that narcissists and psychopaths do not take pleasure or skill in. the narcissist will constantly get themselves into troubled waters, hot water, with, communication, with truthfulness in romantic relationships, work deadlines. I mean, they really kind of feel that some sort of special red carpet should be really rolled out to them wherever they go. And it's like, look, Jack, you gotta, you're a person just like anybody else, so your terra firma might be higher, but you also have to realize that there's a smoothness of communication that might need to be polished up or sort of really solidified, nailed down a little bit harder, and really sort of as a wisdom and sort of like a seasoned wood, if you will, and what that looks like, feels like, and when you're surrounding it. And there's a certain quality, I would say there's a certain quality, not quantity, but a quality that will emanate from your communication once you come through the other side of this, horror, this terror, this difficulty, this gnashing of teeth, the bashing of fists, or whatever it is, that oftentimes gets really the worst of it. It draws out the worst of people. And it's really the primitive. It can be very sort of the immediate gratification of the narcissist, and the psychopath is very much at play. And it will be very ruinous of people's communication. You will need to learn to sort of be able to communicate from a new place, from a new, X on the ground, from a new sort of terra firma, if you will, meaning your groundedness. The narcissist can be very flighty, the psychopath very flighty, not present, no eye contact. And then the deficit that then looms therein when there is not this sort of contact, which the narcissist might say, oh, that's too ordinary, that's boring, that slows me down, it keeps me from my goal. The narcissist, and we're going to do, I think, some videos here on this sort of in different, walks of life and how this looks like. But, the narcissist who, they always have some business thing that they need to do, and then they won't be ready until this, or some creative project, or this, or that. And then, in other words, that day of premise, that day of reckoning never comes. They never come good on their word. And that's a problem, because people in relationships with narcissist and psychopath get used to tolerating when a narcissist is not good on their word, or they're not having open, honest, fair communication that is crystal clear, that isn't plagued by different authority or unfair advantages, oftentimes that the narcissist will take up, as if they're the one who rules the roost and everyone else is just to follow, like clucking along, like, oh, yes, and, oh, I won't, mention that was just really nasty, or that you're filthy, or that you haven't, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, you haven't communicated, you haven't brought that up, you haven't addressed this, and yet it's on me, and then I'm always looking like the bad guy, and it's all on me, and then I might as well just put on, just rags that are from the closet, and I must just walk around because that's actually how I'm treated. I'm just expected to walk around and just sop up everybody else's dirty stories, their dirty laundry. I'm just expected to be like a magnet. So one problem is people become like a magnet for negativity. They just keep drawing it, and that's nothing really more than a pattern that they are repeating. And it's because you're trying to resolve something for someone else, which they need to resolve for themselves. And you need to be able to back it up and go, wow, this individual is very demanding. A narcissist and a psychopath can be extremely demanding to be in a relationship with, not only to meet their expectations, but oftentimes that you have to be willing to go without representation, without speaking, without being heard, without being listened to, without having eye contact, without having a pat on the back, without having a high five, without having a, really, I get where you're coming from. So you will not have that experiential state, which is called validation, which is really, I would say, fueled by empathy, oftentimes, not fake. Now, the psychopath will make a fake, they'll be, they will have learned and mimic. So they will learn, empathy. They do not feel it. It's it's a very cerebral. So it's something that they have learned and picked up, but they don't really get the fact, the reality. You're not crying wolf. You are really hurting. Something is awry. Something is off. This is not right. And then to be able to emerge from that, from that sort of well of feelings, and then formulate it into communication where then that person sees, hears, and feels and is present. That experiential state oftentimes is a complete deficit and deprivation. If you're in a relationship with a narcissist or a psychopath, they don't have time for that. They're too busy. They've got many, many, many other important things to do. Whatever it is on their to-do list is, usually there's some prize that they are working towards, and that is what is the gratification for them. The narcissist, I would say, does not really take place in that long-term gratification. In other words, yeah, we can suck it up for now, but later on, and I have belief in being able to sort of be on the level. There is no on the level. They are always on the mound. And so maybe a very much of a mound that they might have, but you have terra firma also. In other words, you also must and have the right, and not only the privilege or the luxury, but the allowance to yourself. Give yourself the permission to stand your ground. And just to stand, I think is sufficient, because the narcissist always wants to engage generally in some sort of combativeness, playful fighting, where basically there is a win-lose proposition. And they aren't there about to be supportive, look at, some other than glamorous side of things. In other words, if it does not make them look good, then they are going to become very anxious and avoidant around you. So the anxiety oftentimes is, it seems that, you're the factor, and then people then sort of drink the cup that I am inherently flawed, and then that permeates their entire being. It affects their grades, how they perform on their SATs, how they do in their school, their elementary, their junior high, their high school, their college, their professional career, their relationships, their communication. Is what I'm hoping to be able to restore to you from a place that is based on empowerment, and that is based on integrity, and that is not based on the superficiality or the fantasy goals, the illusory, that which is sort of promulgated or thrown in the air, like just a ceramic shot that you're supposed to sort of shoot. You're always supposed to, oh yeah, always go off and jump and do the splits and a backflip, for them, but yet you're not receiving like in return. That is the problem. It's, life on a one-way street. And pretty soon you're realizing, like, why isn't the scenery getting any better? Why aren't I moving up in life? And then, people then have communication problems. Well, if you throw yourself on the back of the Greyhound bus and you don't take a shower for 3 weeks, you're going to come out smelling. In other words, look at your negative thoughts about where you're in the dumps, and then how are you really, communicating what is truly projecting from you as a result of this. But oftentimes there's a payoff, as, poor, the pity party. Poor, pitiful me. This happened. And yes, poor, pitiful you. Poor you, yes, that was miserable, difficult. Oh my God, I cannot believe you made it through. This is earth-shattering. This is very, very, very difficult to process for a lot of people, and to change and communicate, but to become from a different place is the solution. After this, to come from, but as they say, you can take, the city out of the girl, but you can take the girl out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the girl. You can whatever. So there's going to be a certain part of you that you need to cherish and embrace, that is you. Even if many people have not acknowledged, validated, or even loved, you have to realize that cold, lonely, or what feels like abandoned, uninhabitable, undesirable, and, not good, terra firma. In other words, nobody would want to go there. You feel like you yourself are a bridge in Brooklyn, or whatever you want to call it. You're feeling not good enough. I mean, this is the reality. This is the, this is the truth that needs to set you free and will to help you communicate, to call a spade, to call an ace, to call, and to see who, played with your, the hand that you were dealt. And, in other words, where in the relationship was the communication breakdown? I mean, it's very important to identify that. It's kind of like looking at a classic car that's a real beauty that might be worth, $350,000. The car might be worth $1 million too. I don't know, but let's just say it has an old engine and they don't make them like they used to, but you want to get this original car and original parts all going strong. Well, you better take some time, have some patience, have some light, and be able to sort of feel your way and understand some basic inner workings, and not be afraid, to, be able to reconnect, certain wires that need to be ignited. Even if so, do you understand? I'm just trying to sort of follow an analogy, sort of where inspiration sort of, you live on that inspiration. In other words, you're like on that spark. In other words, you're living the unhappy, you're living the good life, but your communication is not based on that falsetto that the narcissist, would have you jump and, or the false vision that the psychopath would have you paint it into. So it's very, very crucial for you to sort of get and not be afraid of the real, and that you can deal, and that it is going to get better, but to understand what is the truth, that you need to emerge from a better communicator after this, because chances are there are some bad communication habits that were instilled or put in place in the course of a relationship where you were love bombed, devalued, and discarded. This is just sort of the pattern that is known in the literature for sort of how a lot of these patterns or cycles work. So you're going to want to break the pattern. You're going to want to change this cycle. You're going to say, that pattern, always erupts in, and, that is not becoming of me, or that is not forthcoming of me. That is not pulling out my best. Educare, the Latin to pull out of. So where are you being schooled? Are you being poorly schooled, or are you being well schooled in communication by this relationship? And where is it too rough? Where were you jabbed? Where were people rolling their eyes at you, jabbing, across the dinner table? Where were they not listening to you? Where did they not have the time of day? Sometimes you have to revisit some, oftentimes maybe painful feelings, but these are sort of kept in just sort of the library of your physique, in other words, and so if you're reading all these books, that aren't bringing out your best and redeeming of your finest, admirable qualities, and you're not polishing those, then what are you made of, or what are you allowing others to make you out of? Is more so the problem. Is that the narcissist, they won't make you out of terra firma. They're based on some sort of fantasy that oftentimes a lot of poor communication, a lot of hiding, a lot of in and out of relationships, a lot of just sort of, thumbing people off, if you will, it's not based on sort of, and they sort of like that. They like to get away with things. They like that special treatment. Well, so does everybody. But we're talking about when it gets to then it then sort of spills over into problematic with them having healthy relationships and healthy communication with a narcissist who has this sort of superficial sort of fantasy like goal. These people, they might come from a lot of money. They might be well endowed in talent. They, might have an abundance. And so they have it good, a life of privileged. They might have worked for it or they might not have worked for it. However, either way, this narcissist or this psychopath, they might be of a different color. They might be blue collar, brown collar, white collar, gray collar. I don't know what color. Maybe it's velvet collar. Anyway, what we are saying is that with this is a type of communication that the narcissist will create a sort of an inclusiveness or an exclusiveness in others that will very much impair the ability to communicate from a genuine, because there's a deficit of empathy. They're sort of not putting into the sauce, they're not sort of adding any parsley. They're not adding any little spoonfuls of olive oil. They're not putting in other words, that empathy, maybe that gives it that richness, that flavor, that, oh my God, and you melt, sort of what is empathy in the sauce? So, what does empathy taste like in the sauce? In other words, so a narcissist or a psychopath, they do not have that empathy. They do not have that ability to sort of pick you up when you're down and hug you and go, oh my gosh, what happened emotionally, or, these are the people who are going to run with the hills, what do you mean you're not making, $500,000 now that the real estate market, and you were doing mortgages before, and, because of the economy, you just went from 250,000 to 45,000. And, the spouse leaves, just stuff like this, that, in other words, lack of empathy, poor communication. I mean, that's an extreme, but this is just a typical example. And what does this do for your impact of how then you communicate and then feel how you're going to then present to the world and draw forth others? To a healthy relationship. In other words, that you go around looking like the emotional garbage man, basically is basically, are you exuding life stinks? This is rough. I can't, I don't have a grip on things. I can't deal with this. So oftentimes the narcissist will be very, they will not want to take responsibility. They will take responsibility for what's fun to them or what's fun about their fantasy. But when it comes to the real deal, like, let's really get engaged, or let's really start the business, or let's really have a communication, so this, they do not want to show up. They do not feel comfortable. They do not feel that they owe it to anybody to have any sort of communication of the sort where they can be, held accountable for maybe some wrongs, hurts, or traumatizing incidences that might have occurred. So where there is no accountability, you're not going to have that closure. You're going to run into a problem, and it's going to cause dysfunction. It's going to cause tension. It's going to cause, that's why you have to look at where the balance is and where it is for each individual when it comes to communicating. But you have to be able to be on the level and really look at and being level with yourself and saying, be rigorously honest. Did I come off too rough? Because of the way that I've been treated, am I coming off too rough now? In other words, because your communication, you might have learned some very bad communication habits while in the course of this relationship. Namely, when people are the subject of narcissistic or psychopathic abuse, number one, they sort of become isolated from a specific self-protection and self-preservation. They really are on a different level, which is very, very scary because they are losing connection to their self-esteem, to their senses, really thriving in the body. This is very unpleasant. This is like on parallel with what you might consider torture that somebody in a military situation might go through. It is the very, very difficult and painful. This sort of abuse. Oh, you're overreacting. Well, you must understand that also narcissists oftentimes display symptoms of being traumatized or post-traumatic stress syndrome. And this also reacts and is percussive of someone like this. In other words, there's always some sort of alarm. They get fearful for no reason. They will just exit stage left. They will not be able to commit. This is ongoing. And then so if they're with other narcissists who are that aloof and that sort of high on themselves, or not high on themselves, but arrogant, I would say. A narcissist may be arrogant and conceited. The way that they are lacking empathy, humility, sort of that texture, that grit that you might. So you have to balance out the grit that you might and need to sort of refine your communication and look at where it put you. Where were you then not able to come from a place of positive self-regard and listening to that, coming from that place? Where did the injury occur in the relationship? Oh, peace and harmony. I can't, let me count the ways. Well, then let's talk about, where did some of the deepest cut? And then you have to pretty it up, pretty much. Not that you have, you have to get into the nitty gritty, but you're going to have to polish it up a little. And especially when it comes to your communication, we could do tons of videos on this and we can certainly address that, but your communication is going to feel different. You're not going to be a people pleaser. You're not looking to appease the judgment of a narcissist. They are trying to judge you at every turn of the stone. And this gets very difficult to live based on a judgment, based outside of yourself. I would say it is largely unsustainable emotionally. You have to be loved. You have to be able to be okay for who you are. And if you have a hair out of place or $5 in the bank, that is okay. If you are based and judged on all these different expectations that you can never meet, then you will be on a perpetual cycle of feeling like a failure. You'll be basically riding the failure Ferris wheel. No matter how good the view, failure is still cranking the Ferris wheel. That is what is set in motion by a narcissist. They will instill that inferiority complex. This is not pleasant to live by. This will come as a result of the way that they treat you, through the entitlement, through the psychopath, through the denying of truthful communication. Both of these personality types have a pathological sense of self-importance. The psychopath, who has a lack of conscience, a lack of morality, to a very cold and calculating degree, is very difficult and creates a lot of difficulty in communication with the psychopath because of the degree to which they lie. They will put on a facade. They will put on a mask, an appearance, and act as if. and act as if when you don't think you should be acting as if. In other words, there ain't no innocence. There ain't no fertile ground of love with these people. They do not grow in love. They do not have this sort of warm-bloodedness. They can act as if, they can appear as if, but that is not the reality. This is an Antarctic sort of gem here, if you will. It's Antarctic. It is cold, okay? But they can mimic and learn and appear warm and appear, but it is an act. And then they can then take, but even the act has an act that has an act. So in other words, these types of individuals, they don't ever really get to let the mask down, really except within themselves. And I think they will also let the mask down to those people who will not, be in a long-term relationship. However, the communication problems will be because of a lack of truthful communication. They might lie about business. They might lie about where they've been. And not just everyday mistakes like, oh, I hope the business is going great, like I'm working and I'm trying. We're talking about knowingly, deceivingly, on high levels, like we're talking Fortune 500. We're talking about all sorts of people in business where they will misrepresent and lie, even though it could hurt vast amounts of people, that they have no qualms, they have no flinch, they have no problem, they do not have any nerve that they are fearful. They do not experience. So they are very cool under pressure. So, but when you have been lied to or misled by somebody, so for example, at the depth of a relationship, like a marriage or a business or something of that nature, then you're going to have, some issues then trusting people after you've been lied to, or after you've had a relationship with a psychopath. It might be, or a narcissist, it might be very difficult for you to trust people or feel that people are good or lovable or fair. But then the communication really is the strength within you. So you are the one that really, you need to regain that trust with and get into that seasoned wood of yourself, that which will come with time. It's a strength and a sound and a feeling and a tone that will come with time and will be able to sort of ring out. But that very ringing out is usually the ringing out, the crying out of your soul that the narcissist or the psychopath is